Hi, everyone. Welcome to Humane Voices, the official podcast of the Humane Society of the United States. Carrie and Austin here for another really exciting episode. We're here to talk SpayAthon and our work to combat animal welfare crisis in Puerto Rico as well as at home. So today, our special guest on the show is Tara Lawler, the Senior Director of Strategic Campaigns for the Humane Society of the United States. Tara, thank you so much for sitting down and chatting with us today. We're really excited to talk with you about this initiative.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk to you all.
Yay. Yeah. So one of the things that I want to do get you to talk about a little bit before we get into sort of the details of SpayAthon, it's so having been in the field for, 20 years since I was a zygote, I know that there's a lot of stuff around this issue of spay neuter. It's like, it's one of those things that's kind of entered our broader culture and everybody's heard the term spay neuter, but I think a lot of the times the need for it and the why kind of still gets a little bit lost. And so I was hoping you could talk a little bit about, why spay neuter continues to be this sort of drumbeat in the animal welfare world, why it matters.
So spay neuter is really at the heart of many of the animal welfare issues, whether it's overpopulation or things that lead to neglect when somebody might have too many in their own home. And it's really the focus of what has been the later part of my career now, and spaying and neutering as many animals in need and providing that access to care. So obviously this, decreases the number of animals that go into shelters and also decreases the number of animals that ultimately can be euthanized. And most
right, so it's a lifesaver, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
like
it's not,
that's the thing that people sometimes miss, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think that, especially in the continental US, we've gotten, so into other aspects of animal welfare that might be a little bit more flashy and, exciting, but at the crux of the issue is spay neuter really still needs to be of our utmost of attention, and that's something that I really feel passionate about.
And so, Tara, was that really, the later part of your work, what led into this inspiration for this amazing initiative? And for those who aren't familiar with it, what is SpayAthon?
So SpayAthon is my ultimate animal welfare baby. So it was something that I kind of dreamed about the first moment that I stepped in Puerto Rico, because you saw this abundant amount of animals in the streets, a lot of suffering, and 95% of the population entering into the shelters ultimately were euthanized. So it was something that when I first stepped into that island in 2014, I'm like, if we could just do mass sterilization someday. Fortunately, unfortunately, after Hurricane Maria, the opportunity came to create something big and never done before. So SpayAthon is ultimately multiple teams operating at once across the island and providing spay neuter, high quality, high volume spay neuter services and vaccines for free in different parts of the island. So essentially it's bringing in volunteer vets and techs from all over the world. They donate their time, and then they're combined with local ground teams that really are like the front of the house, and they do all of the really community outreach. So it's kind of this giant team that comes together for the good of the animals and the people.
So Tara, can you talk a little bit about, what's caused the issue in Puerto Rico? I remember when I first started here that I would talk to people at shelters around the country, and especially in the South part of the US, where they would talk about when they were growing up that, the sort of animal overpopulation issue was just so enormous. And at the time I think a lot of those communities, it was like a lack of infrastructure, a lack of funding. What are the things that are sort of generating it on the island?
So as the continental U.S. progressed in animal welfare, Puerto Rico was left off of that radar. And they did not receive the training, they did not receive the resources, and they certainly did not have the infrastructure to get there. So that was one of the first things I noticed, we needed to do a quick catch up. So when I first started working down there, we started a program called Humane Puerto Rico, which basically inundated Puerto Rico with all of the HSUS programs that we could possibly bring in to try to catch them up to speed and get them to, have a better, foot to go forward in. That's one of the reasons they essentially were not given the same resources as in the continental US.
Wow. Yeah.
I really wanted to tackle it either. A lot of the animal welfare folks that I talked to said that Some of the other national orgs, they tiptoed into it, and then they saw the big problem and they backed right out. And it's a massive, massive undertaking. I think I learned a lot in the last, few years of fortitude and grit. Big, but it's definitely I feel like it's like the most important work of my life.
Yeah. So one of the things, Tara, that I've noticed over my time in the field is like over the years, I would hear a lot of groups doing sort of like taking dogs away from the island, and it seems like your approach has been a little bit different. And can you talk a little bit about like why you didn't think? I mean, I've seen people like groups try to take it on like that. That feels like, okay, we can rescue a few dogs, we can help a few dogs, but you were trying to get it kind of like a more root issue, right?
Yeah. And I can certainly appreciate, when you have little eyes looking you straight in the face, that I get that. I don't, not support that. But at the end of the day, it's a Band-Aid, and it needed something a little bit bigger and sustainable. And so that's why SpayAthon was really created, to really give them the leg up and give the local vets the capacity to start at a place that was, doable, and for them to take it over once we are finished SpayAthon and have a chance to kind of dig out and really just develop, different ways to work together. And that's a lot of the things that I think that we've brought to the island too, just getting the groups to work together, whether that's, rescue groups, because the problem's been so immense, it causes a lot of stress on the humans. And, even when we were doing training, starting off, we had a lot of people coming up, after our trainings and thanking us, saying, when we did compassion fatigue training down there too, that some of them admitted that they were close to suicide, and it's really helped them feel not alone. So it was staggering, like, and even when we trained law enforcement the first couple times down there, officers were showing up 2 hours before and staying 2 hours after just to get time with our trainers, because they never had those resources before. So that was huge, because nowhere in the continental US does that happen. I can promise you that. They might stay for 15 minutes and, get some questions in, but they were really thirsty for knowledge and really, really appreciative, which is made us feel really passionate about the island. I know that a lot of the HSUS staff that have come down have really fallen in love with the people and the work itself.
On the topic of root causes here, Tara, that we're talking about, we mentioned overpopulation and other issues here. Something that sticks out to me about this program is we're talking about socioeconomic issues here as well. So it's not like people who are in these underserved communities don't want to help their animals. They just simply don't have access, right?
Yeah. So a lot of, I use some of my social media platforms to really stay connected to a lot of people that I've met, whether that's just in passing or become really close with. And, frankly, they'll say, I make $200 a month. So getting a spay neuter surgery or feeding my kids, they're of course going to have to feed their kids, and rightfully so. So it was something I was really adamant about. And there's lots of opinions in the field, whether spay neuter should be free, if you can give it for free. And I think if someone wants to wait in a line and provide a service for their animal, they clearly love the animal. It's not our job or place to judge on their income level. It's our job to, as a leading animal welfare organization, to provide a service that we know how to do well. So I think, Puerto Rico has a large percentage of the population under the poverty line, and that's a huge cause of it. So it was also one of the reasons why the shelters, we saw so many animals that were born in a home and then were abandoned on the streets because the people thought they were giving the animal a chance. So it's also like lack of education on what happens to that animal when it goes out on the street. It doesn't actually have a fighting chance, because especially dogs, puppies are a little bit less resilient than cats per se. So you see a lot of really in bad shape animals that we could judge as outsiders of, just having a different circumstance in our own life of choices. There's not many choices there. So I think we want to provide as many good options as possible.
Yeah, and I think that thing with people abandoning animals, it happens, you know, in stateside as well, because there's this
Mhm.
sort of there's so many misconceptions about animal shelters in
Yes.
both places where, you know, like especially in the States, there's always this sort of like, oh, if I bring it to the shelter, the animal will end up euthanized. And
Yeah.
so sometimes people just release the animal, and there are places where, you know, maybe that is going to work a little bit better than others.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we also have worked with the shelters. We have a shelter medicine program that runs concurrent to SpayAthon, and really helping the shelters get out into the community more, so,
Mm.
and be that friendly face, and not a place that's scary to the public.
I'm curious, Terry, how many surgeries have been performed to date? Do you know that number?
We are roughly over 54,000 spay neuters and vaccines
Wow.
done. So yes, so we're
Congratulations.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that's
incredible.
amazing. So Tara, do you have a sense, can you talk a little bit about, you know, I mean, I know you guys have done the surgeries, but it sounds like you've also figured out ways to make sure that kind of the resources and the networks that you have built while you've been there kind of stay in place if this
Mhm.
program ever stops.
Yeah, so at the end of the initiative, we will be giving over all of the equipment and resources to the local veterinary population. We have two teams that are Puerto Rican teams that work within, and then all the ground teams are Puerto Rican teams. So they will be rewarded in the equipment, the resources at the end of the initiative. And during this, we have, with one of our coalition partners, provided training to over 100 vets and techs in high quality, high volume spay neuter techniques. So that increases the capacity and also the proficiency in that type of surgery, in the hopes that it will lead to more sustainable programs on the island.
Right, totally. And that the locals will totally own it, which is terrific.
Yeah. That's
With the
cool.
support of
Yeah.
with government support too, that it's pretty spectacular how on both fronts you have this coordination that you did with in conjunction with a large government too.
Yes. Yes. So sometimes I think there's, silos. SpayAthon is a good example in my mind of what happens when government and nonprofit and profits come together for one cause. We were lucky to have a governor's office that was keen on helping animal welfare during Hurricane Maria, and knew that they had a huge problem for decades at that point. So this is just an opportune time to build something big. And we did have to fight to, keep it going and to make sure that people believe that we could do it. But once people saw, the first round, they fell in love, and we had back there on out.
Speaking of Hurricane Maria, Tara, I mean, Puerto Rico's kind of gotten hammered repeatedly and is always kind of in that hurricane zone. And they've had earthquakes there too. Has that impacted the work?
Yeah, so there's different parts of the island that now have earthquakes on top of the fear of hurricanes during the seasons and things like that. So we actually, prior to the larger ones that happened down in the Ponce area, we were in that area operating. So it's just part of our decision making when we're looking at venues, to be careful where we're sending teams and things like that. So it does come into play. But there's other ways that we can help those specific areas that are more prone to the earthquakes, in vouchers that we do in between rounds too. So we do vouchers in the summer. So that's normally hurricane season. So we don't send teams in there because of the variable of us not being able to travel safely. So during that time, that we really try to target those areas that might be ones that we can't necessarily get to safely.
Have you seen changes on the island since you first started going there?
I've seen the rescue groups really come together. They have really, they had protests in honor of animals. It's something that's a hot topic in the news quite often in Puerto Rico. I don't think that we see that in any other state in the country like we have there. People really are passionate about it. If you know about Puerto Rico, they have big hearts, and they are adamant on making sure that the animals get a voice also. So I really have seen that come together. I've seen the veterinary population identify the problem and want to be part of the solution a little bit more. And then they've been really appreciative, of HSUS and our partners. And I think, a lot of times, people that come into Puerto Rico might make big promises and not deliver. And I think that we've kept our word and really shown that our heart and our minds are there, and we've developed huge friendships that will last far beyond this program.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's the case in so many programs where you're working in a community that's been kind of neglected by people who should have been providing resources.
Yes.
That if you
Yes.
don't continue to show up, that just kind of the trust it has to be built.
Exactly. Yes.
What's pretty incredible too is that your team hasn't just wiped your hands clean, said, okay, this project is done, we're moving on. You've created a transition plan that is really going to create a sustainable way for this initiative to keep going, which is it's very admirable. It's very exciting that this program is going to keep going. In the same vein, you have begun another initiative that your team has been working on called SpayTogether that is a little bit closer to home. So can you talk a little bit about SpayTogether and how that's different or the same than SpayAthon?
Yeah, so SpayTogether has the same type of idea of coalitions make big things happen, and same idea that people at heart, I believe, want to be part of something bigger than themselves. So just like SpayAthon, SpayTogether has over 25 organizations that came together for COVID type relief, basically to help the stateside shelters and clinics across the country catch up on spay neuter services. So it's a stimulus fund. It also provides resources and training, and also just assistance on the ground, the how-tos to operate in a pandemic and this type of surgery, and outreach to the public is done safely. So that program also is over 60,000 animals spayed, neutered, and vaccinated, and over 225 organizations helped nationwide. Every state got some type of funding, about 2.5 million, including in-kind donations of product too.
That's awesome. So the reason for the catch-up was because it had been determined as sort of non-essential service, right?
Yes, and a lot of the places needed to donate PPE to human services.
Yeah.
So we saw that, but quickly as of June, the country was over 250,000 behind in spay neuter services, which obviously starts impacting quickly the likelihood of euthanasia going up in all places that might not have had that typically. One thing that we did see positively in COVID is so many people fostering, failures, adoption, but this was kind of our outreach to those that are boots on the ground that still needed to do the work, but might not be receiving as many donations or have access to keep their work going without our funds. So we wanted to quickly unite, and I feel like my biggest strength as an animal welfare person is that I love team and coalitions and running them, and I will also pester folks until they want to part our team and the funds. So we acted pretty quickly, and the team is rocking it, and our coalition partners are doing a great job. So we should be finishing that up with the final report to the donors in November.
And there's a cool little tool to track all of the work that's going on currently, how many surgeries and everything that we're doing, right?
Yeah. So that's on animalsheltering.org, and that's also basically every organization that receives funds are entering their surgeries live.
Wow.
Also gives you the stats of whether that's a community animal, a shelter animal, male, female, and dog and cat. So I love that. That's actually something that we really, really take pride in, because then our donors can easily click to see where their funds are going and see that the numbers are coming in fast. So it's exciting to us. At the beginning, when it was the first 5,000, I was watching this ticker 17 times a day. It was so I've gotten a little bit better. I only check it twice now. But that was a fun little thing. And I think it also was cool to see the different states kind of being a bit competitive. We had 8 target states in this program, ones that we knew had a higher intake number into shelters, and possibly less vets working on it. So there was definitely certain states that got more funding, but we wanted to make sure that every state got some type of funding and play fair as we could be.
Yeah, it's really cool seeing that tracker. Every time I see it, it's like you're looking at the numbers of lives saved kind of going up.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty cool. We can always talk about how many surgeries are done, but then, the end result of how many lives were saved in the first year alone that, didn't get produced and possibly euthanized is I feel like my heart's goal in this work.
So Tara, I think we need to talk to you a little bit about your next big alpaca project.
Oh my gosh. I definitely hope Kitty Block is listening, because I'm obsessed with alpacas after my trip to go see a beautiful farm that had a baby alpaca when I pulled up, and I fully documented it with no less than 200 photos. And one of them happened to like to snuggle. It was like,
oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
So baby sloths and alpacas are my jam.
Yeah. Yeah. So everybody listening should know that if you have any intent on helping cute animals, Tara's claimed all of those. So you have to go for the less cute animals now.
Yes.
So just be prepared.
Yes. Yeah. I'm totally game. It's going to be great. I can't wait.
So Tara, I'm sure in all of the work with SpayAthon that you've had some really impactful stories. What are some that stand out to you?
So SpayAthon is something that I have the same reaction every night before our round starts off. So every night, right before the round, I text all of our leads, and I'm like, I hope the lines are full. And every single time they write back, go away, they're always full. Because the first round, I was so nervous that no one would show up. But contrary to my worry, we had thousands of people show up. Not only show up, but show up in the middle of the night, sleep outside just to get a spot in line. And I mean, when I first saw it, I had like tears rolling down my cheeks, not because I wanted to see all of those people so desperate for the services, but it was so inspiring. And it was kind of just all that hard work had paid off, because it was proof, that if you build it, they will come. And we had beautiful stories, and there's beautiful stories every single time, but there's a couple that just stick out to me. This one elderly man, I think he was 78 years old. He told us that he kind of like jerry-rigged this crate to his bike, and he pedaled 20 miles in the middle of the night to get a spot in line. And it was because he said that his dog was what helped him get through Hurricane Maria and the aftermath. And he wanted to stand by him, like the dog stood by him during Hurricane Maria. So of course, puddles, like the whole team. And then there's just like other amazing stories where, a lot of times the person who's first in line, they got in line maybe 8 p.m. the night before. So they have now been up for quite a long time. But instead, what, many of us would do after our animal goes back to surgery, take a cat nap, things like that. We've seen them, picking up brooms, making coffee, running back and just figuring out how to be helpful on our clinic sites and things like that. So really, like, the best parts of humans come out in these events. I think that's always something that, the news covers all of these horrible things that are going on in the world and all this hatred. And SpayAthon is like a breath of fresh air of people being kind and just really, what it should be, in my opinion. So there's many examples, and it's really something that when our team is getting up at 4:35 in the morning to get ready, there's not one complaint. I always do joke, there's only been one person that has complained about the lines at SpayAthon, because we run so many different clinics, and that person wasn't from Puerto Rico. They were actually from the States, and I always think that's so I take it with a grain of salt, but everybody else is always really happy and appreciative.
That's wonderful. Tara, thank you so much. This has been really an amazing conversation. Thanks for chatting with us. Tara Lawler, Senior Director of Strategic Campaigns for the Humane Society of the United States. That's all we have for today's show. To find out more info about how we're continuing to help both the animals and communities of Puerto Rico and the United States, you know where to find us, humanesociety.org. Or to check out the really cool tracking tool that we were talking about, head to animalsheltering.org/SpayTogether. thank you so much for joining us, and see you next time on Humane Voices.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.